Thanks for being here. Just maybe a quick, introduction. My name is Albert Chu. I'm a senior product manager with Infoblox, and I'm based out of Seattle. You might wonder why Seattle is so rainy there. But before Infoblox, which I've just been in Infoblox for about a year, I had a career marathon with a small company called Microsoft. So they grew up, but in any case, I've spent 26 years with Microsoft. Started at 18. No, I'm kidding. I didn't start at 18. But in any case, I used to manage the portfolio, the security portfolio in Microsoft that spans Sentinel, Defender, as well as Azure Network Security. But for the last 1 year, I've been privileged to be in Infoblox to really learn more about DNS. And what I did learn is that DNS, in fact, is a very powerful, hidden, silent, but a very powerful thing for cybersecurity. And in the next 20 minutes, we're going to go through what and how DNS could be something that you should seriously consider as part of your cybersecurity strategy. Before I start, I'd like to know how many of you are in the network, admin, network, NetOps. How many of you are in that space? Okay, not many of you. What about SecOps, security analysts? Okay, a lot of you. And how many of you are already doing DNS security? Okay, that's good. Okay, some of you at least, right? Okay. So as most of you know, DNS has always been in the NetOps side, and because of that, we do find that sometimes DNS security is kind of overlooked. But really, when you look at DNS as a point of control, you'll find that DNS can actually do a lot more. It gives you early detection. It actually can help you with operational efficiency. But more importantly, it helps you with enhancing your threat response. And so when we look at DNS, it's almost like the backbone that you and I know, right? It is the backbone that gives you the resolution of your IP address. It's almost like your phone book that resolves into exactly where your address is, right? But it's a lot more than that, because if you really think about it, your DNS server does a lot more. It actually has a view of your entire enterprise, and it does a lot more. It can see a lot of things, right? Your IoT, your cloud devices, everything that's connected to the network. But did you know that beyond that, just within your own network, if you really study hard about the whole DNS and the whole DNS infrastructure, you can actually see a lot more. You can also see your adversary's network and the way they have built out the entire network to try to, of course, do malicious things within the entire internet. And so let's sort of tear down what actually really happens inside DNS itself. To understand how DNS is abused, all right, we sort of categorize it in 4 different buckets. The first bucket is in malware, C2 being command and control, and then DGA, right, domain generated algorithms. Just a show of hands, how many, or maybe I should say, anyone want to guess how many domains are created on a daily basis? Just shout a number, anyone. How many domains? 1 million? A little high. Any other numbers?
700,000.
700,000. Okay, it's not that many. If you think of it, it's approximately between 100 to 200,000, depending on which day, when a threat actor decides to do something about it. Now, if we really think about it, 100 to 200,000, how many of them are legitimate? 10%, exactly. So 10% are legitimate, but 90% are not, right? Okay, if each domain is a small business, I think that's good, right? But the other 90% is mostly DGAs, right? And they're using DGAs and algorithms to actually create a lot of domains, and they keep switching it in and out, all over to make sure that they're able to hide themselves from the entire network. The second type of abuse is DNS tunneling and DNS exfiltration. I think some of you will probably know that DNS being a very benign, very good service, which is very essential for you, essentially is used and abused in that way, where they actually use your subdomain and encode things probably in base 64 or even hexadecimal and send things out. And then at the other side, it decodes it all over again, and basically that's how they actually do exfiltration. And so when you see a very high number of DNS requests and response, and they are basically embedding things in the subdomains, you know they're doing a tunneling at the back end, okay? Okay, so that's the second part. The third part is phishing and lookalikes, right? I think most of you will know things like typo squatting, and lookalikes, homographs. For example, Google, right? Instead of a GOOGLE, they would use a GO with a apostrophe in there, right? To signify the differences. And those are things that are basically used all the time, right? And they are able to do that very, very maliciously and very quietly. And then the final one, of course, now with AI, they are doing even more, right? You are seeing things like malware as a service or even ransomware as a service. And this type are even going more sophisticated, and they're using AI in a very same way to make them more, to make their efficacy even higher. And so when you look at these pieces and how they are abused, all right, you definitely think you should actually really think like security from that perspective. You should really use it as a point of your control, because number one, you can see, you have visibility, you have the ability to stop the threat at the source, and perhaps more often enough before it even goes into the other system. The second thing is, you have it is really the first hop of anything that happens, be it your web, your email, everything that happens, but more importantly, because of its unique position to block threats. And I'll try to help you understand why we call it a unique position. It is actually quite early, right? Like when you think about it, every communication that happens starts with DNS. It really starts with DNS most of the time, all right? In fact, we actually found that about 92% of all malware, okay, starts or utilizes DNS protocol. And this is actually a stat that was given by CISA. Now, if it is reachable, we call it is breachable, right? And when you think about it, when you sort of like start to say like, okay, these communications are basically happening, it is such early in the phase of your entire network, then I think that's definitely a very good control point for you to stop the breach. When we look at some of the ransomware, about 41% of them, right, for ransomware being a subset of malware, there's a lot more malware, some of them are not ransomware. About 41% of them basically starts with DNS. And then once it starts through the DNS, they start using DNS to do data exfiltration as well. So basically doing the DNS tunneling, all those aspects inside. And then a third of them basically will also do a lot of things, in terms of command and control. Funny enough, I think most of ransomware attacks one particular industry hard. Which industry do you think that is? Healthcare, exactly, right. And it's almost like a trifecta for healthcare, because they first of all, they whack them with data encryption, and then after that they whack them with, hey, we're gonna leak your data, right? And then the third one is that they're gonna DDoS you, right? So all this compound for the healthcare industry is really headache. And so if we really tear down some of this, right, we look at how threat actors sort of like works. So we try to observe threat actors and the way they work. Of course, a lot of threat actors have very different ways of working, but generally they have a few interesting ways that is very similar to you and I. They go through this thing called software development lifecycle, right? Or agile, whichever you choose your favorite way of development, okay? So the way they do it is that they have their development, okay? They start with their development, and then after they are done with development, sometimes they use AI, they actually do staging, right? They use staging in part of the whole piece, and then finally they put production. And during the part of staging, a lot of them uses this thing called TDS. How many of you know what's TDS? TDS is basically called a traffic distribution system. or a CDN. I think some of you may know names like Akamai, Cloudflare, F5, name your favorite TDS, all right? Now, those are the legitimate GTDS that's actually doing things for you. It gives you performance, reliability, security, all those things, right? But there are also shadow TDS that does a lot of things that does not the good stuff, right? And those are the ones which a lot of threat actors actually start to do. They will do things like, register domains, then they, set up the infrastructure, and finally, what they do? They configure DNS, okay? So those are the sort of like the step of processes that they do. And so once they set up the TDS, and the purpose of TDS, like I said, right, is for performance, for reliability, and for security. Of course, they don't care about security. They want to make sure that when they spam someone or when they do something bad, they want to make sure that the person gets the best user experience, of course. So they will make sure that they shift things to very close to you from a geographical point of view. They make sure that if they're doing something to you, you still get a really good best user experience. And then finally, when it's in production, like you and I being the victims in some shape or form, they are going to do things and deploy it into your system. What we do observe is that we in security world spends a lot of time, effort, a lot of our resources and investment here. If you really think about it, right, when we attempt to block things in security, all the security tools, think of your XDR or your EDR, think of your SIEM, like your QRadar, Sentinel, name your favorite one, or even your software, your secure web gateways. Most of them are blocking here, okay? They're blocking here, and they are sort of like reacting to the threat that happens. But the reality is that if you start blocking further upstream, and because DNS has the ability to do that, then you actually mitigate a lot of things because it gives you early detection, right? And of course, not all DNS security are the same. You may have a DNS security that you may have today that is based on reputational database. And if they are not frequently updated, or if they are waiting for something that comes in from your OSINT, your open threat intelligence, it's most of the time kind of late, right? It's a bit too late. So blocking here, or if having a DNS security and blocking here really gives you that early detection, then I think it really does a lot more for you from an operational efficiency perspective. What is also more important is that because it blocks here, it can actually help you with cost savings downstream with all the other security tools. Just for example, your SIEM, right? Your SIEM is almost like a cookie monster. I call it a cookie monster. What does it like to do? It ingests cookies. No, not cookies, data. It loves ingesting data. Now, if you start to block things at the DNS level, the amount of your DNS logs goes down, right? You don't have to ingest that many things, right? Or your firewall, who does deep packet inspection. If you let all the things go through, through a port 53, your firewall will eventually get overwhelmed. And then what do? You upgrade your firewall, and you upgrade and upgrade, right? So I think really the opportunity here for you is to make sure that you try to make sure that you block at this level, and you have to have that kind of DNS security to get ahead a little bit. And so here at Infoblox, we specialize very much in DNS security. And in terms of new domains that are registered, I said like 100 to 200,000. We block about 60% of it up front because we have that intelligence. And if you really think about it, we use, of course, a lot of AI, observing the origins, observing the behaviors of the DNS, and then decide whether to actually flag it as suspicious or not, right? And if we flag it as suspicious or not, then your SecOps has the ability to decide. Let's take a look at how we do it from a TDS perspective. I think some of you know how TDS works. Like I said, TDS basically is geographically spread out. It's for load balancing purposes. The picture on the right is basically how they attempt to route your data, to give you the best optimal experience. But what most other DNS security will do is that they try to block domains, and so you sort of like block some of the servers to try to minimize the path that arrives to the user itself. And while that works, it still has a path, but probably a narrower path, but I think it still can reach the user at some point. And so I think what we really need to do is really to have a really solid DNS security that blocks the TDS upfront. And in that way, they will basically run out of servers to basically route the traffic right straight to the user. And that's really the power of using a DNS security that blocks at the TDS level. And that is something that's a very powerful thing for us. All right, I know I've gone through a lot of stuff, but how many of you have heard of this thing called the Black Cat ransomware? Yeah, okay. So good. For those of you who may or may not know, Black Cat ransomware is probably one of the most vicious ones. The Black Cat ransomware is one where I think FBI has been has been involved. Okay, and the United States State Department basically put out a $15 million bounty, right, for information leading to the threat actor. 15 million. So you can imagine. So the first 10 million is information to catch that guy, and then 5 million when they actually catch that guy. Okay, so $15 million. Now, why would they spend 15 million to catch this guy? Well, apparently, and when they look at the whole thing, it is actually really malicious. Number one, they actually estimate that the approximate amount that has racked up, in terms of extortion is in the tune of about 300 to 500 million. So it's a lot of money. All right, and so what is important to know is this, right? The domain names that were registered happened sometime in September 14, 2023. Actually, not very far away, so almost just a year and 2 months ago. And it was registered as pcrandall.com. Okay? Very benign, sounds very familiar, sounds like, okay, sounds legitimate, PC Randall, sounds like a small company, right? But the thing is that when we were, Infoblox, right, when we were doing, through our threat intelligence, was looking at this thing, by 9/17, 3 days later, we already started to flag it as suspicious. And flagging suspicious means that we have not blocked, but we have actually brought this attention to the SecOps to say, like, we think this is a very suspicious domain. It sounds good, it looks good, but actually it's not good, right? So we actually gave that. And then fast forward, there's a lapse of 163 days. Imagine 163 days of things that's happening at the background that a lot of our customers were not protected. A lot of you probably did not know about it as well. Before OSINT actually released it, right, which is about 227, to say, like, this guy needs to be taken down, right? And so most of you will have taken it, upload into your system to make sure that they start protecting those. And so can you imagine, the time lapse, 163 days is really a long time. And if you are able to, I mean, think about it, if you have 163 days ahead of a malicious attack, that's a real good early detection. A really good solid detection, because as a SecOps person, you want to be able to get ahead of the bad guys. And so then really we think that, if you have a lot of this, and I think the business impact to you is really huge. A lot less financial losses, a lot less risk into your system. Like I say, more often than not, you're able to stop it at a source before it even gets into your other system. We have a very comprehensive blog that you actually can read this, and of course I've also put the link below to make sure that you have the ability to read more about this. Black Hat is probably one of the very very malicious one that we have seen. But we didn't really stop there. I think what is important to know is that you must have a real good DNS security that gives you continuous information. Now, there is a lot of you that will probably use different systems. You could be using some that are, a bit more older, but they don't actually have that same efficacy because there's no new threat intelligence that are being developed. And so when you think about it, I think what you want to do is to make sure that you have that kind of intelligence, continuous threat intelligence and investigations that happens. And so this is just a very quick dashboard that we have created where every new and original investigation that we have published is there to actually let you know like how many days ahead that we are actually informing you. So really like think ahead, right? Look at a domain. Like most of us, maybe some of them that looks at it like, oh, this one looks malicious, or maybe this one doesn't look malicious. We have come down to some science through our AI technology and machine learning to make sure that you actually have a lot of those domains that are blocked way earlier than that. All right, so just a quick summary, because it's a 20-minute session, I just want to make sure that DNS being just, a very, like I say, a benign but a very essential service is something that you really should think very hard about, incorporating into your cybersecurity strategy. We have talked a little bit about how it can give you early detection, and the detection that you can see, with great threat intelligence really brings the games ahead for you from getting ahead of the malicious attacks. It is really very cost effective, like I say. As I mentioned, if you are able to stop things upfront, a lot more upfront, your downstream security systems will probably work a lot less harder. That's the whole idea, to make sure, and it becomes a lot more scalable. And finally, with the right threat intelligence from all the different sources, and Infoblox being one of them, you will be able to actually get ahead a little bit. And so that's the whole premise of DNS. Now that this is the time where we want to make sure that given 20 minutes, you only got just the surface of the whole DNS security. I wanted to make sure that I could leave you with something that is more vendor agnostic. You can take out your camera, take a photo of this URL link. We actually have a course, and this is developed by Josh Quill. He's in the room. He is the one who wears a hat that says DNS. All right. He actually also wrote a book. I didn't write a book, unfortunately. I wish I wrote a book about DNS. But this is something that you could go and learn more. But more importantly, I also have some of my colleagues, or you can go to the booth. Should you want to actually do a POC, a proof of concept, which we can actually do assessment or even a POC, we definitely would be happy to do that. We recently actually did that with one healthcare customer, in which we took their DNS logs and actually looked through, and we actually found about 600 domains that were malicious, and out of which we found downstream about 120 of them were actually trying to hit them, right? And so that's the kind of thing that you really want to know, instead of just letting the DNS go and be a resolver, right? Okay. So with that, I would probably leave you 1 or 2 minutes for questions. Are there any questions from the audience here? All right. Well, I will be up here, and I have also some of my colleagues here that will be here to talk more about DNS. But I'd like to thank you for joining me, and I hope that you will look at DNS security as part of your cybersecurity strategy. All right. Thank you.